Hi everyone, Steve, G8NFZ here for the downhill run as we enter part 5 of the video series on operating the ICOM IC7300. It's time to look at the remaining features available from the on-screen menu. Here's the menu button. Let's press this and see what's next. This is the standard menu, which appears with SSB, AM and FM modes. The CW and RTTY mode menus have a small difference, which we've already seen. We've previously seen memory, scan and MPAD. You've already had a brief view of the audio panel. Let's add some detail now. Touch audio. The audio scope appears in the lower half of the screen. On the left is a spectrum and waterfall. It shows the current bandwidth in use, 3 kHz, which is the standard width of filter 1, and the level being reached. On the right is an oscilloscope trace of the audio being received. Just to confirm, the buttons at the bottom are, as usual, touch-sensitive areas of the screen. We haven't relabeled the physical buttons below the screen. They are attenuator, hold, level, time, and expand set. Touching attenuator changes ATT off on the top bar of the scope to one of 10 dB, 20 dB or 30 dB of attenuation of the display. It does not affect the audio itself. Touching hold freezes the display, perhaps before you do a screen capture. The hold indicator then illuminates. Touching level adjusts the gain of the spectrum to one of 0, minus 10 dB, minus 20 dB, minus 30 dB. Touching time adjusts the time base of the oscilloscope. You can choose between one of 1, 3, 10, 30, 100 or 300 milliseconds per division. Touching expand set expands the display to double height. The frequency digits and meter shrink in size to accommodate it. It's possible to display the RF pan adapter in its mini format and the audio scope at the same time. Touch and hold expand set and a new submenu appears in which you can set the spectrum and all the scope trace colors. You've got a choice of 16 million in each case, and also if you wish you can turn the waterfall on or off. Let's now look at meter. You can see its effects from here or get exactly the same response by touching the standard on-screen meter. And all the meters are shown. Next is voice. This opens up a complete subsystem. The voice option shows the voice TX panel. The panel has 8 buttons, each of which, when pressed, can trigger a voice recording to be transmitted. Press and hold, and the transmission is repeated with a small gap of your choice until interrupted. Touch again to interrupt. Touch TX level to adjust the outgoing gain to match your normal voice. If you get it right, the recipients shouldn't be able to tell if you're live or recording. The usual multifunction knob adjusts the level. A press of DEF returns it to the default. As shown here, it is 50%. Touch Rec Set to reach the Record Set menu. Why this isn't a touch for one and hold for the other option isn't clear. Someone somewhere just likes menus. Choose Rec to enter the recording listing screen. There are 2 screens to accommodate the 8 possible messages. Each is listed by name and shows the length of the recording in minutes and seconds. It seems unlikely that you would want to automate a message of any real length. Mine are basically CQ calls. Amusing when my rig is used stroke portable for a club contest and I go home to hear myself calling CQ from afar. All menus like this can be scrolled using the multifunction knob, by the way, or you can choose one by touch. I've selected the first empty one, T6. Here's the recording screen in action. There are three basic controls: record, play and stop. The red dot flashes during the recording, and the times show the recording length and the pause at the start before you speak. It's a good plan to stop recording as quickly as possible at the end, otherwise the AGC takes off on the silence. Watch the recording level and don't overcook it. There's no need to press the PTT when recording. The mic goes live and is listening from the moment the record button is pressed. Play it back. If you don't like it, just re-record. The old one will be overwritten. If you find yourself distorting, adjust the recording mic gain. Just touch the button. And a pop-up appears by which recording level can be set. Once more, the default is 50%. You have to use the buttons on this one. For some reason, they have not made the multi-purpose knob do it. Once recorded, the voice message will show in the list with a time duration, but now it needs a name. Long press the recording number and the quick menu appears. If it's all gone horribly wrong, choose clear. Otherwise, choose edit name. And you get the keyboard of your choice to give the voice TX record, in T6 for this example, a distinctive name. Remember that you won't see all of the name on the button, so try and make the first few characters both memorable and unique. Press ENT to enter the name. And voila, T6 is now called Demonstration. Let's move on again. We've covered the shaded items. Now we'll look at record. It's not record. The cassette tape lives on in this little icon. There are four options on the QSO recorder menu: record start, play files, recorder set, and player set. Recorder set comes first. Here are the 6 choices across the 2 pages of the recorder set menu. Rec mode can be just receive, or both receive and transmit. TX rec audio can be direct, the microphone audio, or monitor, the audio that is being transmitted. RX rec condition can be always, just records even if there's silence, or squelch auto, only records when a signal is present. File split, if off, then the audio all goes into one file, changing to a new one if it reaches 2 GB. If on, then each over is recorded in its own file. The files are date and time-stamped to the second. PTT Auto Rec controls whether or not the recording process is triggered by every transmission. If so, then any reception within 10 seconds after the transmission is also recorded. Pre-rec for PTT Auto Rec. If you set Auto Rec on, then the radio will retain a choice of 5, 10 or 15 seconds of audio received before the PTT was pressed. Bit spooky. On the player set menu, there is one option: skip time. You can set this to 3, 5, 10 or 30 seconds. It's the forward or reverse skip that will be used when playing back a recording. On the Play Files menu, files are saved in a folder, a new folder for each day. Open a folder by touch, then choose a file from the folder. Touch and hold to see the Options menu. The Options quick menu allows you to view file information or carry out deletions. File information is pretty thorough. If it's a received file, then the S-meter reading is shown. If it's a transmit file, then the transmit power shows instead. A click on the file name rather than a click and hold opens the player with the file loaded and begins to play immediately. All of the files in the folder will play sequentially. You have normal recorder controls available. The small arrowhead shows when the sound is playing. The lower row of buttons from the left are return to start, previous, skip back, you can set the skip time, like 10 seconds, pause or play when paused, skip forward, and go to end, next. If we start recording manually using the Rec Start option, then it changes to show Rec Stop instead. Once we have these settings in place, then we can use the quick button below the TFT screen to quickly see a Start Recording or, once running, a Stop Recording option. On this pretty busy screen, you can see the record icon, which appears during recording. The SD card icon will flash while it's busy too. The rec icon blinks while it's standing by. You can also stop recording by touching it and confirming by touching yes when it asks if you meant it. Typical of this radio, there are 3 ways to control the recording action. Here's the confirmation pop-up. If you touch yes, then recording stops. Back to the menu. As well as the SWR meter, the radio has an SWR graphing utility. You can see the SWR as viewed by the radio across a range of frequencies where you wish to work. Because the SWR system needs a continuous carrier to carry out the test, choose the RTTY mode. This transmits a tone when the PTT is activated. Set the output power to about 40%, then press the menu button, followed by a touch on the SWR button. The SWR screen appears. In this case, I have already executed a test, and the radio remembers and brings up the result of that test. The test will be centered on the chosen frequency. You can choose how many bars will appear in the test graph using the bar button to select 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 or 13. You can select how big a step is involved in each test with the step button. The sum of your steps should fit within the band you've chosen, but if it would work out too wide, the radio won't test there anyway, because it involves transmitting. You can choose from 1, 10 or 100 kHz steps. Be aware of other people on the band. You will be transmitting a series of tones spaced step kilohertz apart from below to above your center frequency. Start the test with the Start-Stop button at the bottom left, and then execute a series of short presses on the PTT. Each press measures the VSWR at that frequency and draws a graph bar, then moves up. At the end, you have an SWR graph. As you can see, my antenna is very sharp. All bars with the red sections have a VSWR above 1.5. The radio stops counting after 3 to 1. It hopes you don't go there. I actually wanted to demonstrate operation at my chosen center frequency of 7.1 MHz, and you could perhaps see that my antenna was actually centered just below there. Now I press and hold the tuner button, and after a clatter of relays, rerun the test with the tuner in circuit. And here's the difference, now tuned out by the rig to give a perfectly centered 1-to-1 SWR at my target frequency. Please remember, this is not real. The radio simply stops the problem affecting the PA. The antenna is still reflecting power. Those of you who can still remember your VSWR theory will also recall that the power is not lost. It either causes radiation, possibly from the coax, or causes something somewhere to get hot. No matter, it's a neat trick and safeguards your investment. We'll now move on to the Set menu. This bit's important. No nodding off allowed. The Set menu is not for routine driving use. It's designed to deal with the settings that mostly stay put once established. It may take some time for the ideal settings to be arrived at, however. I would advise investing in as many SD card files as fit your operating choices. One for rag chewing, another for contests, probably a third or more for various digital modes, and so on. When you touch Set, you are presented with one of 2 submenus. This is to lull you into a false sense of security. Here they are. Tone Control, TBW, allows you to set the bass and treble audio or the bandwidth for each operating mode. Transmit and receive are set independently. There are 21 settings behind this menu option. Not going there today. Let's begin with Time Set. Time Set lets you set the date and time. They are maintained by an internal battery-backed clock. If you wish, you can also set the UTC difference. The time that shows in the top right of the normal screen is always the date time that you have set. UTC only becomes visible if you touch the time to raise the time panel. The local date time is used to stamp all recordings and screen captures. RTTY log files can be UTC timed if you wish, which is a good idea for log files. There are two pages of the SD card menu. You can format a new SD card. Do it here, not in a PC. Formatting sets up a number of folders that are required. If you wish to remove the SD card from an operating radio, then unmount it. That's the same as ejecting a memory stick from a PC. It ensures that saving or reading are not interrupted. Firmware update is used when ICOM issue a new version. The update file is downloaded and saved to the SD card in a PC. It's a process that must be done carefully to avoid making the radio inoperative. If you get it wrong, ICOM say it will need to go back to Japan to be fixed. Screen Capture View allows you to view screens that you have captured. They can be scrolled through using the multifunction knob. The SD card info shows how much space there is and how long that represents in recording time. Save form ensures that settings are saved in the correct version for the firmware to be used. Save settings allow all of your settings to be saved to a file. By default, it is named by date and version stamping. Load setting allows pre-save settings from any IC7300 to be loaded into this radio. Matching firmware versions are essential. For anyone interested, the settings file is binary. It can't be read as text in a PC. When the SD card is formatted, a number of folders, directories, are created. Capture, decode, and voice are used to store records of screen captures, RTTY, and voice QSOs. The DAT file in the root shown here is a downloaded firmware update from ICOM. The settings file stores everything else as shown in the menu system and also includes pre-recorded CW and RTTY messages. Pre-recorded voice messages have their own folder. Others is a 4 options submenu. Information shows the firmware versions of all of the devices in the radio. The top item is the overall version number. Touchscreen calibration offers 4 dots in the screen corners to be touched in sequence, and this recalibrates the screen. Well worth a note here is a reiteration that the screen is not, apparently, capacitive sensing. It does not need a bare fingertip to activate. I even use a cotton bud stick or an artist paintbrush to touch accurately. Reset comes in 2 flavors. Partial reset resets VFO and menu options, but not your call sign, memories, memory keyer, RTTY memory, band edges, frequency reference adjustment, or fixed edges. Comparatively safe and may get the radio out of a stuck situation. In my case, a corrupted settings file stopped the radio from transmitting SSB. Partial reset solved the problem, and I very quickly saved a new copy of the settings file. All reset is a factory reset, back to the out-of-the-box state. The radio forgets everything you've ever told it and everything it has learned. Hope you've got good backups. Emergency will permit you to transmit into what would otherwise be an unacceptably high VSWR. Under normal circumstances, the radio simply won't do it. This is, of course, to protect the PA stage. Just imagine a 4.5 kilogram parcel to Japan and a decent sized bill and a long wait. Being a Pratt is not covered by the guarantee. Here are the 2 reset options. Make sure you've backed up the radio settings to an SD card before you proceed. If the problem you're trying to recover from stops you making a settings file, then you should have done it earlier when it was all working. Partial reset does make changes, and a review of all settings should be undertaken after a reset and before operating again. Are you sure? Reset shuts down the radio and then reboots it automatically. Most settings will be safe. For the all reset, you need to be very sure. Touch Next. Really sure. If you touch Yes, it will be too late to do a No. The radio will reset and return fresh as the day it was unboxed. You do get a further, very bright warning screen. Touching Emergency opens the menu page. You are invited to confirm your choice by first ticking the box. And the radio wants you to be sure again. Note that the output power will be limited to 50 watts maximum. Touch OK to go for it. Now select the Restart to Set option, which will be flashing on and off. The radio shuts down and reboots in emergency mode. The big E icon where tuner normally lives, top left, reminds you that you are now in emergency mode. If you turn the radio off, then the next time you fire up, you will still be in emergency mode. You have to go back into the menu and untick tuner to go back to normal, and the radio will once more reboot to do this. Here are all 4 pages of the Display submenu. All of these are pretty obvious. If you walk away from the radio and don't transmit for the screensaver period, then it blanks. The receiver still works, so you can hear it. Touch the power key, not a press, or the screen to get the screen back on. If you change display language to Japanese, you'll have fun getting it back to English, but Icon canny, and the instructions for amateurs with itchy fingers are in the manual. There are 4 pages of the Connectors submenu. These settings are used when the radio is under computer or remote control. Many pages of the manuals to read if you're going there. There are 8 pages of the Function submenu. There are 31 options. Many of these have further menus behind them. Page 1, beeps are useful. Beeps sound as you tune across the band edges. Page 2, you can set multiple user band edges and make them beep as you cross them. I've set up beeps across all bands. Some, for example, indicate the edges of CW and all mode sections, and so on. Page 3, Tuner allows all the saved tuner settings to be managed. Page 4, here's where you decide if the lady speaks, and the speech lock button swap, for example. Note that the function button on the radio does not call up this list. It calls a menu of its own to activate functions rather than set options. The remaining 4 pages look like this. These are equally straightforward options and illustrate the depth of adjustment that is available. Don't be tempted to touch Ref Adjust. It is factory set and controls the accuracy of the main oscillator. The only time this should be amended is if you have a precision calibration source against which to set it. Let's go back and recall page 1 of 8 from the function option of the main menu, and we can see that there's an option to turn beeps on and control them with user values that also limit where the radio will transmit. This can be quite useful and could save you from making an unpopular choice of transmit frequency. Let's have a look at page 2 of this menu. This time we'll actually touch the top option, User Band Edge, since we have elected to use them. Incidentally, if you don't choose the user band edges, the radio will default to standard edges of its own. Please note these are not the same edges as used by the scope and waterfall. Here are the 8 pages of the user band edge list. You can create and edit up to 30 of these. So far I've used 24. The rules say that they must not overlap. That's why there are lots of 9s, leaving a 1 Hz gap between entries. You cannot set frequencies outside of the amateur bands, as programmed by Icon. Remember, they've short-changed us 1.5 kHz at the top of 60 meters. By taking the option to block transmission between user bands, it allows settings to include band gaps for such things as beacon only, or the gap between 29.510 and 29.520, bands 18 and 19 on my display, which is a guard channel for satellite working. Each time you tune across a boundary, you hear a beep, a high pitch going into a band, a low pitch when leaving. If the change is 1 Hz within a band, then just a single beep lets you know you've moved, for example, from the CW section to the all mode. All bands must be listed in order. The radio does let you insert one, however you have to make a frequency space for it first, or it will not be accepted. Choosing one of the 30 bands shows an editor where start and end frequencies can be entered. If you type an overlap frequency, it will be refused by the editor when you press ENT to complete your entry. This completes the set menu and our look at the menu system. We can remind ourselves of what we've seen with a diagram. Here's a graphic of the top 3 levels only of the menu system. It does go deeper than this. Each item with a red border has a sub-menu below it. White bordered items are actions. The third level of scope, audio, voice, keyer, decoder, SWR, memory, scan, memory pad, record and set are all shown. To avoid you having to count, there are 95 items here. The main menu is a comprehensive thing. You've seen only 2 levels. There are more, but they all operate in the same way. If you read this book by Andrew Barron, ZL3DW, available from the RSGB or Amazon and for the Kindle, he has placed a guide at the back which lists very many actions and gives the button press sequence to get there when you forget where the setting is. I'll also mention the Facebook group ICOM IC7300 users, the star of which is John Micktook, N2VAN in Panama, New York, an IC7300 expert with the patience of a saint. Penultimate video coming next. You're nearly an expert. See you in part 6.